So welcome everyone. This is our cover letters how to start workshop. We are excited that you're here today. My name is Joan Marceau. I am the internship and career coordinator for Rockefeller College. I recognize some of your names, so good to see you. And I have with me also one of our GAs in our office, Leslie Fuentes Mejia, which I'm sure I didn't do that exactly right. I've been practicing, but Leslie is here to help with some of the behind the scenes things. So if you have questions at any point as we're going through, feel free to type them into the chat and she will let me know when there's questions. And sometimes she may even actually just answer them right in the chat, but also it's a great way to communicate with us. And she'll be doing the recording and all of the other behind the scenes things. So thank you so much for joining. Looks like a few more people are joining us, but we will dive right in to talk about cover letters. So let me go ahead and I will share my screen. Excellent. So some of you may be very familiar with cover letters. Some of you may have never written a cover letter in your life, and that's okay because we're going to start right off with what really is a cover letter. A cover letter is business letter. It's a persuasive letter. It's usually 3 to 4, 5 paragraphs long. It accompanies a resume in many cases when you're applying for a job or internship. Um, and it's not a normal, like intuitive way to write. So for many of you, this is a different style of writing than you've probably done before. So don't worry about that. I'm going to kind of walk you through some of the basics in terms of how to construct and organize a good, effective cover letter. The most important thing that a cover letter does is it really is going to detail why you're qualified for that specific position. So your resume, which typically is included as they're really the two pieces of an application, usually a resume and a cover letter. The resume typically kind of outlines all of your relevant skills and experiences and accomplishments, but a cover letter is going to be very specific to the position you're applying for. So it's going to focus in on why you're qualified for that specific position, be it a job or an internship, why you're interested in that specific organization, and what are the relevant skills that they're looking for that you've pulled from their job description or their job posting that you are that are your best skills. So why are your best skills a good match for what they're looking for? So that's the basics of what a cover letter really is. A few tips on cover letters. The first thing is, and I think this is one of the most common mistakes with cover letters, is to just write a generic cover letter. Just like you have one resume and you use it for lots of different positions, some people write one cover letter and use it for lots of positions and just change out the name of the organization. The biggest problem with that is that employers can tell it's a generic cover letter because if you're not specifically addressing the skills and the job duties that they're talking about, they can tell. And it looks like you are just applying to everything and you're not particularly interested in their organization. So making it specific to that position and that organization is really crucial, and it's going to make you stand out in the applicant pool. Don't just summarize your resume. You're sending them a resume also, so that's got kind of everything. In a cover letter, you're going to pick a few of the skills that are or experiences that are most relevant and go into more detail. So rather than just a summary of your resume in paragraph format, it's going to be specific to a few different things. And you don't want to focus on what you gain. I mean, employers, they're nice. They want you to, grow in your professional development, but when you're writing a cover letter, it's not about what I'm going to gain and how this job's going to help me. It should be about what you bring to them, how you can help them, what you have to offer. That's really the focus. You want to use active voice, not passive voice. And if you're not familiar with those terms, we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. And you want to be really action oriented. Emphasize your accomplishments, your key skills, things like that. And one of the best ways to do that is a technique called the START technique. Some of you may have heard of that. If you haven't, we're going to talk about that a little bit more, actually quite a bit more in depth later in the workshop. And then just one little note, if you're emailing in your resume and cover letter, don't put the cover letter in the body of the email. You should have just a quick summary email that says, you know, please accept these materials as my application for whatever position, and then attach both the resume and the cover letter as PDF attachments. So questions about that? Again, if you have questions as we're going through, feel free to pop them into the chat, and Leslie will let me know, and we will address those either right away or at the end. Okay, a few other tips about cover letters. Some of these are similar to a resume. Typically one page, single space, one side, standard business letter format, which I'll talk a little bit more about that. You want it to match your resume. If you're submitting a cover letter and a resume, use the same font, style, the same margins, the same heading, things like that. Make it look like a uniform set of application materials, and that is more impressive, obviously, to employers. You want your font size similar to a resume. Typically 11 to 12 points is a good size. Margins 1/2 to 1 inch. Avoid abbreviations, and you want to just, you know that this is a writing sample. Sometimes employers ask for writing samples also, and you'll send a research paper, but in any case, your cover letter is a writing sample. So you want to be sure that you're varying your sentence structure, you're demonstrating your best writing skills as well. So any other general cover letter questions before we dive into the specifics? All right, so let's talk about what is in a cover letter. What are the pieces of a cover letter? There's really 6 different sections. The heading, which is the addresses and date. The salutation, that's the greeting. The introductory paragraph, and then body paragraphs, typically 1 to 3. 2 is probably the most common, but 1 to 3 is the window for body paragraphs. A closing paragraph, and then your signature at the end. And we're going to walk through each of those, and I'll show you examples, and we can talk about that. So the heading, there's really 2 ways to do the heading on your cover letter. You can do it like a standard business letter, which is the format you'll see on the left, where you first put your address, email and phone number, a blank space, blank line, the date, another blank line, and then their name, if you have it, title and address. That's the heading. If you prefer, the other option is to match it to your resume. So you can put your contact information on the top, like I did in the right-hand side there, to match your resume, and do that as the first thing. Then you would still put the date and their address as the other part of the heading over on the left margin. So any questions about formatting the heading? Either is perfectly acceptable. It's really a personal preference. Okay, so let's go on to the salutation. So the salutation is where you're going to kind of greet the person. Again, this is a very traditional style of, writing a formal business letter, which people don't do in business very much anymore, but cover letters are one of those places we still do that. So I've got some examples of how to address a cover letter. So feel free, just type into the chat, which do you think is the best option? You don't have to rank them all. Just tell me which you think is the best option. Just type that into the chat. And
question about the previous slide.
Oh, yes, I see that. Yep.
Yeah. So is it necessary to put your whole address, not just city and state?
So that's a great question. And while you guys are typing in your answer to this question, I'll answer that student's question. So it is traditional to put your full address. I mean, if there's a reason that you prefer not to, I think it's probably okay. You're not mailing them in the mail anymore, but I think the traditional format is to include your full address. So unless there's a reason not to, my recommendation would be to include your full address. Again, it depends upon the field you're in, and I work with Rockefeller College students, which is political science, public policy, criminal justice. So again, government work, this field is a little more traditional. Some of you may be students in other majors, and you may be in a slightly less traditional field in terms of application materials. So there may be a little more variance, but we do recommend using your full address. So what am I seeing? I'm seeing a 2 hiring manager, dear internship coordinator. Any other thoughts about which of these is the best choice? Okay, so I'm going to go to the next page and give you some of the whys. Some are good choices and some are not so good choices. So the two best choices really are the Dear Ms. Smith and the Dear Internship Coordinator. Um, and I'm going to come back to them in a minute. I'm going to talk about why some of the others are not good choices. So, Dear Sir, you might think, you know, that's a very, very traditional thing, but the reality is you might be addressing this to a female person or a male person you don't necessarily know. So that's kind of offensive to half of the population. So you don't want to start out by offending with a 50% chance you're offending the person you're sending this letter to. Same thing with hi, Mrs. Smith. You're making an assumption about someone's marital status, which is typically not a preferred thing to do in a business setting. And also the term hi is a much more informal way and not as appropriate for a business letter, a cover letter. To hiring manager. To is more like, you know how like we send emails, more of a memo style. It's again a little informal, so that's not preferred. Hiring manager would be an acceptable title. So I'll come back to that when I talk about the ones at the top, but the to makes that a little informal. And then to whom it may concern is a very common thing used in cover letters, but the problem is that makes it look like it's a generic cover letter because you're just saying to whoever happens to be reading this. And you want to do a little research and try to find out who you're sending it to and to make a more concerted effort to personalize that letter. The other thing that you'll note on a couple of those is they don't all have punctuation. Dear Sir and Hi, Mrs. Smith don't have a punctuation at the end. You should use either a comma or a colon. A colon is the two dots. Semicolon is one dot and a comma underneath it. That's a semicolon, not semicolon. Colon, which is two dots, or a comma is the appropriate punctuation at the end of a salutation. So the two best choices are Dear Ms. Smith or Dear Mr. Smith. You know, that's a formal way to address somebody. If you don't know their gender, like you have the name, but you don't know the gender, sometimes names, they might be ethnic names or just some names are not so gender neutral. Also, people are more varied in terms of the program pronouns they use now. So if you have any question about whether Ms. or Mr. would be the right choice, you can just use their first name. So if you have their name, like Dear Mary Smith, so that would be an appropriate option as well. If you don't know their name, and sometimes you can find the name, it's in the application materials, or it might be on the website. If you can find the name, great, use it. If you can't, then I would address it to an appropriate title. So if you're applying to an internship, Dear Internship Coordinator is always a great choice. Dear Hiring Manager would be a great choice if you're applying to a full-time job. So questions about any of that? I know it seems like a little thing, but it really is kind of that attention to detail and making sure that you're not offending anyone in the first sentence of your cover letter. So, all right, so let's move on then. So the next section is your introductory paragraph. And this is kind of, there's some standard things that would typically go in an introductory paragraph. You're going to identify, you know, why are you writing to them? In most cases, what is the position you're applying for? List the company name, things like that. And I've got a sample on the next slide, so I'll talk about that. But basically, you're going to be telling them why you're writing to them. The next thing you want to do is kind of talk about why you want to work there. Relate to their organization, why this specific company. This is the one place where you're kind of talking about them, why you want to apply to them. The rest of the cover letter, you're going to be talking about your skills and experiences. This is the one place where you're going to kind of, you know, go to their website, find out about the organization's mission, particularly if it's a nonprofit organization or a for-profit organization. Government agencies, not always so much, but even them, find out what the mission of that department is. Or if you're applying to a legislative office, what is kind of the key policy areas that legislator is focused on. So relate to that, kind of connect how your passion relates to the mission of that organization or that department. And that really is an important thing to do. It's just 1 or 2 sentences. It's a chance to really talk about why you're interested in that particular position. Not what you're going to gain from it, but why you're interested in working there. It's a fine distinction. So, questions about that? Does that make sense? And then typically you're going to give them a little demographic information. You're going to state that you're a student. If you're a Rockefeller College student, obviously you would state that, or a university at Albany, depending upon what your affiliation is. And then you can include your major or your minor, your graduation date, 1 or 2 of those things that seem the most applicable. If you're applying to a full-time job after graduation, then listing your graduation date can be helpful. If you're applying to an internship, you may just say I'm a junior or something like that. So those are kind of the basics. And then that last sentence of your first paragraph is going to be a summary of the skills that you're going to talk about in the rest of your cover letter. And it really is kind of like a thesis statement. So just like when you're writing papers or speeches or things like that for class, that in the beginning you do that thesis statement that kind of summarizes what you're going to tell them in the rest of the letter. That's what this sentence is. So let's take a look at an example. So I'm writing to be considered for the fall internship program with Senator Charles Schumer's office. As a political science student focusing on American politics, I have discovered my passion for analyzing political data, learning how our government works at different levels, and the impact policy has on constituents. So in those first 2 sentences, this student has explained why they're writing. I'm writing to be applying for this internship program in this office. So that's kind of your basics. And then that second sentence, that's where the student is talking a little bit about what their interests are and how it connects with the work of that office. Make sense? Questions? Then the student goes on to say, I expect to complete my Bachelor of Arts degree from Rockefeller College of Public Affairs and Policy in May 2024. And then we get to the thesis statement. My extensive research and writing skills combined with my previous legislative experience make me a strong candidate for this internship. So that's kind of the big point of this letter, is summarizing those skills, research and writing skills, legislative experience, and that makes you a strong candidate, or them a strong candidate for the internship. So that's how you want to end that first paragraph. And then you're going to go on in the next couple of paragraphs, we're going to talk about those in a second, to talk about that research and writing skills and your legislative experience. Make sense? Questions? All right. So let's go on. So that's the introductory paragraph. The body paragraph. So the next section is the body paragraphs. And I mentioned that typically 1 to 3 is kind of the window, 1 to 3 body paragraphs. 2 is probably the most common, the average. And what you're going to do in the body paragraphs is this is where you're going to go into more detail about those experiences, those accomplishments, those skills that show that you're qualified for this specific position. They're going to support that thesis statement from the last paragraph with details and evidence. So wherever you can include specific numbers, examples, dates, things like that, that provides a stronger statement. Just like we, talk about in resumes, you want to put some concrete information in there. The same thing applies here, but we're just going to go into a lot more detail in a cover letter than you do in a resume. Then we're going to use that START technique, and I keep talking about it. I think it's on the couple of slides, and we're going to get to the START technique. But the START technique is really a formula for how to structure these body paragraphs. And then the thing you want to do is you really want to show, not just tell. So you're going to paint that picture. You're going to describe how you did this through narrative and really show how you have this particular skill that you're talking about. And again, you want to connect. It's basically, this cover letter, these body paragraphs, connect all the stuff that's in your resume or key things from your resume to the specific position and or company that you're applying to. So make sense? Questions? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about assertions. So one of the things that, you're going to be, one of the things I think that's hard about writing a cover letter is that people feel like they're bragging about themselves. And the important thing is you are going to make some assertions. An assertion is something that you state, that you've declared, but you want to back it up with support. So if you're just saying things like, I'm a good leader and I can do this and I can do that, that is going to feel more like I'm bragging, and that can be uncomfortable for many people. It also doesn't really help the employer. They're like, okay, so they say they're good at these things, but how do I know they're really good at those things? So what you want to do is any assertions that you make in your cover letter, you want to support with evidence. So you can ask yourself, with an example, I'm a good leader. Ask yourself 2 questions for anything like that that you put in your cover letter. The first is that skill or assertion relevant to the job you're applying to? If it isn't, then just remove it. You want to be sure that your cover letter is focused on the skills that they're saying they want. So read that position description carefully, look at the skills they're looking for, look at the job tasks that they're listing, and identify the skills that they're looking for that are a strength for you. And that's what you want to focus on in your cover letter. And then the second question to ask yourself is the assertion in your cover letter supported by background information, details, or examples? And if it's not, then that's where you're going to provide more detail. Make sense? Questions? So now we're going to get to the magic start technique and how this is going to help you structure it. You're going to describe a time that you actually did this skill, not just saying I'm good at it. And that actually is going to feel more comfortable for most people and feel less like bragging and more like telling a story about a time you did something in a class or in a job or in an internship. So the START technique is really an acronym, and each of those letters stand for one of these steps in your paragraph. So S is for situation. That's basically the scenario or the background in my blank blank class, in my internship. That's the situation. The task, that's what you did. And I'm going to walk you through some examples in a minute. So the task is what you actually did. A stands for the action. That's how you did it. This is where you're going to get into the detail. This is where you're going to go into a lot more detail than you do necessarily in your resume. The R stands for result. That was what is the outcome? Again, not always part of the resume. So that might be another piece that's giving more detail than you have when you've maybe listed the same thing in your resume. And then the last T is the takeaway. What can you take from this experience and transfer to the position you're applying for? Now, typically each of those letters becomes one sentence in your paragraph. I will say that you can sometimes combine the first 2, the S and the T, situation and task, sometimes can be one sentence in the paragraph. Sometimes it's 2 separate sentences. It really just kind of depends on what you're saying and your style of writing. The action step is the one that sometimes will be more than one paragraph, more than one sentence. It's all one paragraph. That can be more than one sentence. So you might have 2 or occasionally even 3 sentences to describe the action, how you did it, because this is the meat of it. That's the real detail. So questions? All right, so let's look at an example. So in my 3 years at the University at Albany, I've completed a great deal of coursework covering current issues in politics. So that's the S, that's the situation. In my race, law, and society class, I wrote a research paper about the differing racial, social, and judicial attitudes to the opioid epidemic in relation to the crack epidemic of the 1980s. So that was the task. What did she do? I'm going to say she because this is a paragraph that I got from a student's, a really good one from a student's cover letter. So I know who wrote it. So I'm going to say she. So what was the task? She wrote a research paper about and then gave a little detail. So that's step 1, step 2, situation, task. Now let's go to action. How did she do it? In conducting research for this paper, I researched policing trends during the peak of the crack epidemic, sentencing patterns and attitudinal shifts within society regarding addiction using academic databases, data code books, and journals. So that's the how. And see all that detail in there? She researched things. Where did she research it from? From academic databases. All of that kind of detail really paints a picture of how she did that research. As you're reading it, you can almost kind of picture her sitting in the library or online or wherever she was doing this research, doing that research. So that's the action step. Then the result. Then I presented the findings of my paper to a class of 35 students using PowerPoint. So the result, that's going to vary. Sometimes the result is the accomplishment. In this case, she put it in a paper and presented it to her class. Again, there's detail in there. She talked about presenting to a relatively large group, did a PowerPoint. So all of those little details just continue to paint the picture and give you more information about her range of skills related to this research and writing. Make sense? And then the last sentence is that takeaway. This is where she's going to connect it to the position she's applying for. So I'm confident that my prior courses have laid a solid foundation of knowledge and experience to be a research intern. So this is relevant because it's a research internship. So these are important skills that are going to help in this position. So make sense? Questions? Okay. I'm going to flip the coin here, and I'm going to read an example of a really bad start paragraph. And what I want you to do is, based on what we were talking about and the good one you saw, now as I write this one or read this one, I want you to type into the chat anything that you think is problematic with this paragraph. What are the biggest issues with this paragraph? So, in high school, I did a 1-week observation in the courthouse. They told us to take notes about what we saw. I've always wanted to be an attorney, so this was the bomb. I took lots of notes and learned a lot. This experience has given me the skills I need to someday be an attorney myself. Because of this, I think I would be a good intern. All right, I love reading all of the the answers. So let me go back. You're getting on a lot of them already. It's way too informal. The bomb, definitely, because all of those are really informal and unprofessional language, definitely. Stay away from referencing things like that. Using a high school experience, again, also not really relevant. Unless you are a first-year student in college, I would not use a high school experience in a cover letter. You want to do something that's more recent from college, or if you're a graduate student from maybe your senior year of high school or senior year of college or current graduate school. You definitely want to use more recent experience. And it doesn't really follow the START technique very well at all. You are correct. It sounds like they told us. Yeah, so that's a really good point. It says they told us to do this, and that's not, you want to show that you've got these skills. You're taking the initiative. So great catch on that one. Learned what they didn't expand on the skills. Exactly. So you really don't, not that employers don't, like to know that you're learning and things like that. They're not less concerned about what you learned, but they want to know what your skills, what did you actually do? And that is really missing from this one. Very informal and unprofessional. Yeah, so you've really hit on a lot of things. And it's just in and of itself, I mean, it was observing things in a courthouse. That's not really yeah, I think this would be a good intern. Yeah, it's really, they don't really sound confident at all. There's a lot of missing things here. So you really want to stay away from a lot of these kind of red flags. So great job. Let's look at another example of a good start paragraph. So the first one I gave you was an example from classroom. This is an example from an extracurricular or a job, actually a job. Resident assistant is a job. Though some of these types of skills might apply to some, leadership experiences, other leadership experiences on campus. But again, beyond the classroom, I've taken an active role in campus activities as a residential assistant. Okay, so that's the context, that's the situation. In addition to my other responsibilities, I was tasked with planning 5 events for a floor of 25 undergraduate residents. So again, there's good detail. What was the task? The task was to plan 5 events for a floor of 25 people. Through this position, so that's task. Now, how did they do it? Through this position, I identified cost-saving methods to create fun and inclusive programs despite a limited budget. So we've already learned that they planned fun and creative things. They had a limited budget, so that's a good detail about that kind of range of event planning skills here. To increase attendance, I created the graphics for the programs, which included physical and digital flyers. So again, good detail, physical and digital flyers using Photoshop and Canva, weaving in some of the software programs that this person used to do that. So that says, oh, I know how to use both Photoshop and Canva. So there's a lot of good detail in there about how they did that. While working on these events, I learned how to work under strict deadlines. So again, referencing strict deadlines and working as a team as well as individually. So again, likely other skills that were identified in the position description. I believe that the event planning and graphic skills I've learned from this position will better enable me to serve as an events and internship communication events and communications intern. So again, referencing skills that are specific to that. Now, one thing I will say is that typically you're going to each of your body paragraphs, and like I said, typically 2 in a cover letter, is going to focus on one skill or one set of skills. So that first one really focused on research and writing skills. This second good one, we'll skip the bad one in between. This one focuses on event planning skills, marketing skills, I would say things like that. But you notice that she wove in a few other little things, attention to detail, or strict deadlines, working as a team or individually. So as you're reading that position description, you want to identify a couple of skills or skill sets that are your strengths and have a body paragraph focused on each of those. But some of the other skills or qualifications that they've got listed in the position description, if you can weave these in, not write a whole nother sentence or a whole nother paragraph about it, but just weave that in, this is a way to do that. So this is a really good example of focusing on one thing, but weaving in some other skills. Make sense? Questions? Okay, so we're not going to do this whole activity, but I want you to take a minute and think about this. So to get you started in terms of learning how to write start paragraphs, because that's really the bulk. The other parts of a cover letter are kind of formulaic, and once you learn kind of the formula, you're good to go. But these start paragraphs, this is the meat of your cover letter. So what I want you to do is thinking about the next job or internship that you're applying for. What are some of the skills that you think employers are going to be looking for? If you've already been looking, you have been reading position descriptions, you might already know. If you haven't been looking yet, think about what are some of the skills that employers are likely going to be looking for whatever the next position you want to be. And just jot down some 5 or 6 skills. So it could be things like research and writing. It could be analytical skills. It could be event planning skills. It could be communication skills. It could be other people's skills. It could be organizational skills. It could be, think about the types of skills that probably are the employers are interested in for the positions you're looking for. And if you have no idea, or if you're not quite sure, then my recommendation is over the course of the next couple of weeks, or as you're getting ready to do a job search, start looking at position descriptions for things you're interested in applying to, and look for those common themes of different skills that they're looking for. Then for each of those skills, I want you to think of a specific example of a time you did that. So it could be from a class activity, a paper or a presentation or something in a class. It could be from a job or an internship. It could be from a leadership involvement on campus. It could be from a volunteer experience. But try to think of at least one specific example or activity or project that matches up with each of those skills, so that when you start writing cover letters for the positions, you've got an array of activities or examples that you can put into your cover letter. And just for our purposes here in the chat, just go ahead and just type in some of the things that you're already thinking. Like for research, I would do the blank paper. Just type a couple of things into the chat if things have come to mind already in terms of specific projects or activities or examples that would match up with some key skills. And then what I would say is while you're thinking about that and doing that, then your next step, which we won't do right now, but your next step after the workshop would be to start with one of those and then start writing a start paragraph for that. And I will say that it's always good to, you want to be sure that you're writing your cover letter specifically for a specific position. But when you start applying to jobs and internships, you're probably going to be applying to similar types of positions. So you will be they'll be asking for similar skills. So having 5 to 6 solid start paragraphs kind of in your repertoire, saved in your computer, that you can, when you go to write a cover letter, just pull a couple of those in that are most relevant. You're going to tweak them probably every time. You'll tweak them a little bit. You may change them out a little bit. You may change the example. You may focus and emphasize certain parts of that project or that activity more, because in this position description, they were more focused on the social media skills. So maybe you would talk about how you did social media marketing for your event, not necessarily the flyers. So that's the kind of thing that you get your kind of basics ready to go, and then you can tweak them for individual cover letters. Does that make sense? Does anyone have questions? I'm just looking to see if anyone or anything in the chat. Okay. So before we get off of the body paragraphs, the start paragraphs, I want to talk about 2 more things. One is what type of detail to put into the paragraph, because I kept saying put more detail in. And then the other one is that active voice, passive voice, which I talked about previously. So the details that you want to include, you want to be careful that you're putting in helpful details and not just extraneous details. And extraneous details are really just extra words that distract, take up valuable space, don't really add anything to the point. So a couple of examples of that would be during the first semester of my sophomore year. Well, that's a lot of detail that doesn't really matter to the employer. They don't care if it was the first semester or the second semester. They may not even care if it was in your sophomore year. That might not even be relevant. You may just say last year, last spring, something like that. That's a much more concise way of saying it. You need those transitional phrases to kind of make your letter flow, but you don't need all kinds of detail about exactly when things were. Another example that's really kind of extraneous. Then I put the responses into a spreadsheet and showed it to my supervisor. Okay, well, showing it to your supervisor, if this was part of a job, of course you did that. That's not really part of your skill set that you want to be talking about to the employer. So you want to take out some of those kinds of extraneous details. I always wanted to be an attorney. Again, we've talked about it. Cover letters are about your skills, what you bring, what you want to be when you grow up is not all relevant in a cover letter. Now, I will just say as a side, when you're applying to graduate schools or law schools, some scholarship or fellowship programs, occasionally some internship programs, they may ask for a personal statement, or they may say in your cover letter or personal statement, please address why you're applying to this program. If they ask you for that, include it. But if they don't ask for that, then typically those kinds of things don't go in a cover letter. Questions? So what are helpful details? So helpful details really are descriptors that provide detail about your skills and accomplishments. So that's really the key. If the detail is about your skill or accomplishment, that's good. If the detail is about the project, less relevant. Sometimes a little bit of context about the project is good, but a lot of detail about the project is not really helpful to you, because they want to know about your skills and accomplishments. So, and again, some of these are from our previous examples, but I created the graphics for the program, which including physical and digital flyers using Photoshop and Canva. So that's the detail about the skill. What programs does this student know? What types of flyers did they create? How did they use graphics? That kind of detail, that's helpful. Another example, I managed the budget of the project, which included organizing all of the fiscal information into an Excel spreadsheet and analyzed the funds to determine where cuts could be made. So that's a step-by-step about what they did in terms of that skill set in managing the budget, the detail about using an Excel spreadsheet, analyzing the funds, determining where, all of those things are good detail about their actual skills. The other one, I interviewed an attorney working with juvenile delinquents and youthful offenders, witnessed juvenile arraignments, and conducted legal research. So again, that's 3 key skills. They uh, interviewed an attorney, witnessed arraignments, and conducted legal research, and then went into more detail about where they were doing the research. So again, that's the kind of detail you want to include. It's going to strengthen your case about why you are qualified for this position, and it also shows stronger writing skills. So questions about any of that? Okay, so let's talk about passive voice versus active voice. And my guess is some of you maybe have heard this in some of your classes, depending upon what type of writing you are doing in your classes. But one of the things that I think many college students do is fall into a trap of passive voice. Often when writing research papers or things like that, we write it in passive voice. It's a kind of a normal style for research papers, not always, but often. But the problem is it's like it implies, it's passive, whereas active voice is about you taking control and what you're doing. And it just sounds like if you knew nothing more about it, would you rather hire somebody who was passive or somebody who was active? The active voice, which is a style of writing, makes you seem like a more active person, a more confident in control person. And of course, that's the type of person that an employer is going to be much more interested in hiring or selecting for an internship. So let's talk a little bit about what the difference is. So passive voice, by definition, is when the subject or the noun is acted upon by an object. So in a cover letter, you are the subject, and it's somebody, and the object acts upon you. So like, my responsibilities were. So that somebody gave me these responsibilities. This has allowed me to. Whenever you are after the verb, it's usually passive voice. So these are all kind of language that is more passive voice. I was able to, this has allowed me to, this required me to, this greatly improved I have been given, my responsibilities were. All of that language gives the impression that you're just letting things happen to you. And is that the type of employee that people want? No. Active voice, on the other hand, is when the subject, the noun of the sentence, performs the action on the object. So I created, I organized, I used this opportunity to. By blank, I learned. As a result, I improved my. So again, you don't want to start every sentence with I. So using those introductory clauses, like the last 2 examples there, helps you vary your sentence structure, but still maintaining active voice. And when you're writing an active voice, it gives the impression that you're taking control of your actions, that you're the one taking the initiative, you're the one doing it. And that is a much more, if that's the type of employee or intern that people are looking for. So questions about that? And I think it's something that it takes a while to kind of get an ear for. But one of the suggestions we always have is that you have people review your, resumes and cover letters. And other people, if you are writing in that style, ask, just say, is this passive voice or active voice? And then we'll give you some feedback on that. And you can learn how to write in active voice if that's not your natural tendency. Okay. So that's the body paragraphs. We spend a lot of time on that because that really is the chunk, the bulk of the most important parts of it. So now let's talk about that closing paragraph. This is where you're going to summarize your strengths, your skills that you talked about in the cover letter or in those body paragraphs, and reiterate your interest in the position. So one of the things that is, it's a technique when writing papers or writing speeches, is that you tell people what you're going to tell them, like in the intro, then you tell it to them in detail, and then you summarize it at the end and tell them what you told them again. Part of that is just the kind of norm that you need to hear things 3 times to understand them, but it also sets the stage for this is what I'm going to tell you. Then you give him all the detail and then you summarize it again. This is what I just told you. And that really is the format that you're going to use with your skills for your cover letter. So you start the closing paragraph by summarizing those, not just random things, the things you talked about in the last couple of paragraphs. Discuss next steps, maybe requesting an interview, indicate how you can they can contact you, and then most importantly, thank the employer. So what does that look like? There's a lot of different ways to word these things, so you can kind of find one that fits with your personality and your style. Thank you for your consideration. Thank you for your time. Thank you for reviewing my qualification. Those things they're all saying the same thing. You can use one that kind of fits your style. That's one way to kind of personalize it to your style. You still want it to be professional language, but you can, pull from any of these types of things. I look forward to your response. I look forward to hearing from you. All those are just different ways of saying the same thing. So let's look at a closing paragraph all put together. So I believe that I am a strong candidate for this internship position due to my political experience, teamwork, and leadership experience. Oh, I changed that one and then I put experience in there twice. So you would not want to put experience in there twice. So I would probably say, I didn't like the one word that was in there. And so I rewrote it and now I didn't proof it again. This is why you should always proof things many times. So I probably would say, I believe that I'm a strong candidate for this internship position due to my political experience, teamwork, and leadership skills might be a better way to say that. So that's that summary of what you talked about in your last couple of paragraphs. I look forward to hearing from you, and I would be interested in interviewing with you to expand on my qualifications. So that's a nice way to say that you'd like to do an interview, to say something like to expand on my qualifications, to further discuss the position, to further discuss my qualifications, anything like that. I can be reached at the contact information above. So you really don't need to put it in there again, just reference back up to your contact information above. And then most importantly, thank you so much for your time and consideration of my application. So that's the bulk of what you're going to put in that closing paragraph. Again, just kind of obligatory things to wrap things up and kind of talk about next steps. And then your signature. So you do want to sign the letter because again, this is a formal letter. And I know most of you, if not all of you, have not lived in the era of formal letters. Sadly, I am old enough to say that I have lived in the era of formal letters. But a cover letter is still formatted, even though we send it electronically 99.9% of the time, it is still formatted as if it were an actual letter that was typed and signed physically. So if under the rare circumstance you are actually signing your letter, you would want to sign it in blue or black ink above your typed name. So it would be sincerely, and again, you want a formal ending. So sincerely is the most common one used, and then you would sign it and then type your name below. Because 99.9% of the time you're going to be submitting this electronically, we're going to replicate that look in an electronic format. And you can do that one of two ways. You can just use a script font to sign your name, Joan L. Marceau, in a script font, or you can actually save your actual signature as a JPEG or a PNG file and put that into the letter. It doesn't make any difference. If that's something you know how to do easily and you like doing that kind of thing, and that's a techie thing that you can quickly do, great, go for it. If that's going to stress you out, don't worry. Most people just use a script font and put their name on there. If you're really tight on space, you could just do sincerely and your typed name and skip the signature one. But again, this has the more traditional look and it just kind of, fits with what you're looking for in a cover letter. When you're submitting the applications, one common thing that used to happen is that they would say at the bottom of the cover letter, resume attached. If you're submitting it electronically, you don't want to say that because you're going to attach both of those to an email or you're going to upload both of those to a website portal. So you do not need to say that, even though you may see examples online where that is what it says. So any questions about the signature? Okay, so a few final tips. you want to be sure that you research the organization and base your cover letter on that research. You want to thoroughly read that job description, tailor the cover letter to the specific position. Don't just copy another cover letter and change the name of the organization. You really want to be sure that those body paragraphs, the skills you're focusing on in there, are tailored towards the position you're applying for, and that it links to the organization that you are applying to. Now, that being said, you don't need to start with a blank piece of paper every time you write a new cover letter. You can look for patterns. I mentioned that already, that often if you're applying to a number of jobs and internships, they're going to have similar skills that they're looking for. And you can, use another letter as a template. You can have a kind of just a list of body paragraphs pre-typed up that you can just copy and paste in. But then again, each time you want to carefully read the position description and tweak those body paragraphs, or rewrite a few of them. Sometimes you have to come up with a whole completely new one because it's a different skill you've not addressed in a previous cover letter. So you want to be sure that you are not just copying and pasting everything, that you can use that as a template to get started, but then you want to really personalize it to that position and that organization. And the other thing I will say is proofreading it is so important. And if you're doing copying from previous ones and modifying from that, you have to be even extra careful about the proofing to make sure that you changed the name of the organization in every place. Like, for example, is if in the end of your paragraph you're applying to, you did a sample one, you did one to a legislative office, and so like it's someplace you might talk about your constituents in there, and someplace else you might say in your office or join your team or something, and then you apply to a nonprofit organization, and then maybe it's not appropriate to say office, you probably should say your organization. So look for all of those little things that might need to be tweaked if you're using one as a base and modifying it for a different one. Excellent. I know a couple of you have to leave to go for class. That's great. Glad you could join us. We will share the recording with you as well. And we've only got a couple of slides left. So proofreading is crucial. And proof it yourself, have friends proof it, go to the career office, have us proof it. There's lots of ways that you can get some extra support there. So does anyone have any remaining questions about cover letters? You can type them into the chat or use the raise your hand feature and unmute, and we'll be happy to answer any additional questions you have about cover letters. I don't see any. Feel free to keep typing in. I'm going to go through my last couple of resource slides for you, and then if you've got questions, keep typing them in. And I'll stay on afterwards individually if you've got some individual questions too. But I do want to highlight some of the other resources available to you. We do have, we're doing a whole series of workshops this fall. I know some of you have attended the other ones we've already had. We just did the cover letter one. In 2 weeks, on October 3rd, we're doing the Search is On, which is internship and job search strategies. So if you're looking for an internship for spring, or you're going to be graduating in December or next May and starting a job search, we would encourage you to join us for that workshop. And then on October 17th, we'll be talking about interviewing, putting your best foot forward. So then that will wrap up our kind of basic career skills workshop series for this fall. We do have lots of other resources available to you. The career handbooks. This is the cover letter one here, actually. But we have these quick resources on a variety, various career skills. They're available in our office. The Rockefeller Career Office is in Milne 105 downtown campus, and Humanities B16 on the uptown campus. For those of you who are not Rockefeller students, the main career office is in the Science Library, and they have lots of similar resources and handbooks and things like that that might be specific to your major or just general for students in any major. And some other departments also do have their own career office. So if your department has a career office or career staff, you can check with them for other resources that might be specific to your field as well. We do have our virtual career series on YouTube. You can go to the Rockefeller College YouTube channel and click on virtual career series. And we have a lot of workshops from the last few years. This one will get added there eventually. It takes us usually a few weeks or a month to get them uploaded there. But we have previous workshops from previous years there as well on a variety of career topics. So check those out. Our website is a great place to access the career handbooks. I mentioned you could pick them up physically, but we also have them available online on our website. Handshake is a great resource. Don't forget that. You can create a profile, see upcoming career events, schedule appointments with the Rockefeller staff. If you're seeing the main career office staff, they schedule appointments through EAB. And if you have departmental staff, you can check with your department to see how they schedule appointments. But lots of resources on Handshake with jobs and internship postings and things like that. And then the Rock Your Career newsletter. Rockefeller sends out a weekly newsletter to both our grad and undergrad students in our majors with upcoming events, career tips, career resources, internship and job postings, things like that. You may check with your department if they have similar information, weekly newsletters or things like that. And then Handshake, of course, is a great resource for job and internship postings. So questions about any of those? And then I will just put up our little thank you slide. Thank you. You can contact us at rockefeller.careers@albany.edu. Again, we work specifically with students who are political science, public policy, and criminal justice majors and minors. If you are not one of those majors, we're glad you joined us to learn how to write a cover letter. But you can contact the main career office in the science library. That email is career with no S, at albany.edu. And this is our contact information, but you can also go to the main career office in the science library. And we encourage you to stop by our office hours, schedule an appointment. We're really here to help you with any of your career